Hello, my lovelies. Just waiting for Danny. So, just wait for some people to come in. Eee. So, hope everyone's keeping all right. And this is my new PC I'm working from at the moment. So, everyone okay out there? Are you, London Cabby? Yeah, I'm well. Danny should be with us shortly. Oh, good evening, Nomad Scouser. Oh. Are you, Tony? Do you know what? I can smell garlic wherever I'm going, and I haven't even had. Are you, Pedro? We're just waiting for Danny. He'll be here shortly. Are you, Kelsey? Now, I can smell garlic wherever I'm going, and I haven't had any garlic this week. And this is what happens when you get your nose done. You get rhinoplasty, you can mess up your sense of smell. And I start imagining I can smell things that aren't around. Are you, Danny? So just waiting for Danny to get himself ready. But you know what the weird thing is? You know when you can smell something like that, you can smell garlic. You start tasting it, and it's starting to make me feel, ooh. Here we are. Here's the man himself. How you, Danny? Can you hear me?
Hello, how are you doing? Yeah, I can hear you.
All right,
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you brilliantly. Thanks for doing this anyway. Absolutely great. Just got a few people calling in. Hope Thingo comes as well. I keep on going to call him by his real name, Humble. If Humble calls in, I'll have a little chat as well. So, give us a quick update. Where are you at the moment?
I'm clean, I'm happy, I'm healthy, and things are good.
And you're still going strong then?
Yeah,
you're
going
in Dublin?
Strong. I'm 10 and a half months. No, I'm at home. I'm back in Carlisle.
Oh. Just that there's a delay on it.
Yeah. Yeah, so noticed that a little bit.
You're doing it from your phone?
Yeah, on you go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
It's usually all right.
It's got a funny connection, but we'll get through it. Don't worry. Anyway, so last time we spoke was a while ago, wasn't it? Way, way back.
Was.
Yeah. See what I'm getting, Danny. I don't know whether you'll have to click off and click back in, but it's like you're freezing, you're going out, you're freezing, you're going out. It's flashing. You're supposed to like flash the screen now and again. I don't know whether you'll have to go out and come back in because, yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll go out and come back in. Give us a minute.
Okie dokie. Yeah, because that will drive people mad, that just freezing and all that. And so, what are you doing, Kelsey? I tried to find your name right before to make you a moderator, and if you want to be a moderator, that is, and no way would it find you. It just would not find you to be able to meet. I put your account name in, everything, wouldn't find you. So I don't know what's happening there. So anyway, anyone with any news or any questions? Yeah, I put your name because in your channel name you'd also have numbers after your name, don't you? Put them in. Nothing would find you. Copied and paste, nothing would find you for some strange reason. Don't know what that means. Do you know what that means? Yes, again, let's hope it'll be best this time. Yeah. Yeah, it's still a bit glitchy.
No better.
But well, yeah, it's you freeze, and then thankfully the audio's all right. You can hear you though there's a delay, but it's just the picture is you keep on freezing, then animating, then freezing. So I don't know. Is this backed up?
Just check my internet speed and it's right.
Yeah, it's going strange for some reason. But anyway, let's see how far we can get with this. Anyway, you've been in Dublin.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Yeah, it went great. Enjoyed it. Yeah, I was just there for the experience. You know, I was, like I said before, I'm not part of any, political or media.
Somehow I think this is going to be an aborted interview. It's not going to happen, is it? So just, I'd say I think we'll have to call it a day and rearrange it for another time because there's no way you'll be able to sit through this. You're going off, Danny. What I think we'll have to do, this is going to be happening all the time. I could wait a minute, you seem okay now, but it goes off, then comes on. That's how this goes. You seem fine now, but I thought we're going to have to report this if it keeps on playing up.
I just went off there, I think, because I answered the phone. My youngest just on the way back from the shop. I told them
to... Fact Not Fiction is blocked. Sorry. I don't need little trolls like that on here. So they ruin it for themselves because this what I would say. They could actually say something. No, even ask a question that it's difficult or awkward. They can ask a question like that, but they do themselves out of it by being insulting and just trying to be horrible. And as I say, you've just lost the chance now to ask a decent question or ask a question that they want answering that might not be very easy to answer, but with the funny, silly sense of humor, they just ruin it and they get blocked off. So, fact not fiction. Sorry, but you've got yourself blocked
You
now. Just so you get them, don't you? Anyway, what I want to go on about is last time we spoke, we were talking about your journey in recovery. Is that what you call it, recovery? Is that what you like
what I
to
call it, recovery and self-discovery.
So, and I've been watching your videos as well when you're talking about it. So, where do you find yourself at this present moment? Now, what I mean by that question is that are you in this happy mode, you know, where everyone's brilliant, everyone's great, that a lot of people who get over addictions they go into this like not euphoria, but like everyone's brilliant, everyone's wonderful? Or are you in that space where it's like this is reality now and it's got to go on like this?
Yeah, more the latter, really. You know, things are good. Things are good, and things are probably as best as they've ever been. I have been on that pink fluffy cloud for quite a while in recovery, but you know, it doesn't last forever. And you know, like you mentioned there, reality kicks in. You know, you realise it's a long road. You know, and this rainbows and unicorns. You know, it doesn't last. You know, it just doesn't last. You know, but it was good while it lasted. But like you say, reality's kicked in, and you know, there's a lot of hardships in recovery. Do you know what I mean? You know, only at the weekend there, when I was away, you know, I got that feeling of like that I was missing something, like missing the session, really. Do you know what I mean? And it comes over as in waves sometimes. It's not to the point where it's, you know, so strong that I'm going to go and use. But the thoughts are there, you know, where I'm forgetting about all the pain and all the bad times, you know, and I just seem to remember the good times, you know, and it's like my addiction trying to sort of manifest itself, and I've just got to put myself in check, you know what I mean? I've got to cast my mind back to all the bad times and all the pain that comes with it, you know, and thoughts quickly diminish, but you know, they're definitely there. They're there all the time. And you know, these thoughts, these intrusive thoughts, you know, they're manifesting, they're manipulated in all kinds of different ways.
The chattering monkey, as the Chinese call it. Yeah,
absolutely.
The little chattering monkey. It's see, this is what I've always thought about as well. And I don't know what you think about this. You know, when which you can't compare the two really, I gave up smoking and it took me ages to give up smoking. It's because it was such a long, difficult road for me to go along. When I finally achieved it, I said, you know what? I'm never going through that again. And that's also kept me, the idea of having to give up again and go through all that nightmare thoughts. Now, so half the time I think, you know, if they could come up with an injection that would stop you being addicted to anything.
Yeah.
Half the time I think that would be a waste of time, because then you just go back on it. But if you struggle, it's like people who are giving up weight. I've heard more people who lost loads of weight.
Of you too. Yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah, they've always said, haven't they, when they give up weight? I don't know how many people say it. They say, oh no, they say, I'm not going to slip up because I know what it's like. I'm not going back to that, having to lose her again. So half the time I think if you do struggle, it's better for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I cast my mind back to them first 30 days. You know, I've done 30 days 4 times now in total in recovery. The first 30 days for me, you know, getting clean is hell. It's absolute hell. Because, you know, when there's something in my bloodstream or there's something in my, you know, in my chemistry, you know, that's just the way my body works. It's how my addiction works. For 30 days, it just screams, feed me, you know, and it's very, very clean. But once I've got 30 days out of the way, I'm okay. But, you know, I'll never have to do 30 days again. I'll never drink or use another substance, you know, as long as I live. You know, I've had enough of it. I'm absolutely done. But I've just got to keep thank you, baby. I've just got to keep myself in check, you know what I mean? Because your thoughts can run away with themselves sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, you'd only, as I say, the devil's only 2 turns away. You know, you're only a couple of bad decisions away from, you know, from ruining yourself.
Oh yeah, that's it. This is the thing, and life will come. And I've always said this, but especially when you're trying hard, it will come along and punch you in the face to see just how determined you are. It does work like that. It seems to work like that sometimes, I find.
Yeah.
It was like, here we are, now you're going to try, you're going to do it. So what was it that made you think, what was that point where you reached the bottom of the pit and you thought, I've got to get out of this now, or I'm never going to get out of it? What was that moment?
I've spoke about it many times, and about that probably the lowest point in my life was about the 22nd of December 2021 in HMP Preston. It was just the worst, darkest day ever. It all seemed to come crashing down that day in prison. I got some bad news off the chaplain to say that my auntie, who I was very close to, had died. And, I went down the chapel and I cried an absolute river, and it's not something that I hadn't done before. I broke down in tears many times. But this time was different. Up until that day, it was everyone else's fault. I just never took any accountability or responsibility for all the people I'd hurt, all the harm I'd done, all the wrong, all the pain. Everything was never my fault. It was never ever my fault. That day was my fault. Whatever happened, call it whatever you want. But it was something happened to us that day in Preston Jail. And I went into the, really, really deep state of reflection. And I knew that I had to change. I had to change, I had to change. I had to make a change. And I did.
Now, you said something interesting there. When you said that nothing was ever your fault and that was suddenly your fault. Was that, because I find that fascinating, and I'll say something about that. Do you mean that you wouldn't accept responsibility for what was happening, or you were blaming it on other circumstances, and that's how you would continue?
Both. I never, I would, no matter what I'd done, no matter what it was, it doesn't matter what it was, the whole spectrum of mistakes that I'd made, I could justify them all by saying, well, if he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have done this, or if this hadn't happened, or if I hadn't had this over there, it just didn't matter, and I could make it sound very believable to the point where, it's actually what I thought. It wasn't just me blaming other people. I actually thought this was why I was doing what I was doing. But ultimately, me, I was messed up, but it took us a while to see that.
Because I remember hearing I was talking to one of a guest a while ago, and she turned around and she said, because I was attacking. What was she said? I was attacking my abuser or something in the past. She attacked someone, ended up in prison, but her explanation of it was she was attacking someone. When she attacked this person, it wasn't that she was attacking that person, she was attacking someone that abused her, some like psychological thing, and I said, pulled her straight, said, don't give me that, don't give me that, because once someone says that, they're not reformed as far as I'm concerned. It's not a matter of, and wouldn't we all be in a hole if we all went round thinking, oh, I know what, I'll attack that person because of what someone else did to me in the past, because they remind me of them, or they've triggered something in me. And I thought, even if that is true that they triggered them, you don't use that as an excuse. So I always go cold when people say, oh, because that's what also these people who do nasty things to kids, how many of them turn around and start claiming that they would abuse a child?
Yeah.
Which I think is worse, because they know the bleeding what they're putting a child through. So you always get that. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I think once someone says, no, this is my life, this is my responsibility, I make the decisions. And even if they do wrong, they say, yeah, I'm wrong, but I admit I'm wrong. And I think that's the best thing to do.
I remember Go on,
Danny.
I remember that feeling, that first feeling that I'd ever had, really, of genuine guilt, genuine regret. I didn't regret anything I ever done. Because I had a lack of concern for the people who were harmed. You know what I mean? I was at the center of my universe. I was at the center of everything. I was the only person that mattered, and somehow, some way, I thought I was the only sane person on earth.
Yeah.
But when I did get that first feeling, it left us depressed, because it all come in at once. And I'm talking about every person that I'd ever harmed, every mistake I'd ever made, every wrong turn I'd ever done. It was all at the forefront of me thinking. It all came at once. It wasn't like it was just the odd thing crept in here and there. You know, I just looked at my whole life as a catalogue of regret. You know, and it took a little getting over.
That's it. It is I think any kind of change, especially when it's a life change, because getting rid, especially if addiction's gone on for years and years and years, some people it's gone on for the majority of their life, and to give it up, literally the person has to change the whole. It's almost like the change in the DNA. That's what it is.
You need to change. You know, they say you need to change one thing, and that's everything. You know, and there's not a word who has said. You know, you cannot do anything that you used to do. You know, and when and change everything and change it radically. You know what I mean? You can play about with it and put your foot in and say, "Oh, I'm gonna." You know, you can start where you want. It doesn't matter. You know, I dress differently. I talk differently. I act differently. I've got different decor in my house. I listen to different music, different people, different places, different friends, different associations, different everything. You know what I mean? And that's where I have to start, and that's how I have to look at it. Because if you start making these changes too little and not very often, you're just going to end up back in the mire.
Yeah, that's it. You have to be very, very, I say, on the ball all the time. But it's like you say. I've seen you mention looking at life in a different way. That's also what has to change, and not seeing life. This is what I think is essential. Not seeing life as a exciting journey, which some people do, because it can be boring, it can be horrible, it can be ugly. It's like, what song I used to always hate and still do? It's all creatures great and small. I hate that song because I used to always say this is denying the brutality of what nature is. Nature is cruel, and we forget as we're sitting, we're not having to put up with famines. We're not having to go out to actually grow our own food and do this. We forget just how ugly and vicious nature can be. So when people go on about beautiful nature, no creatures great and small, it's like, no, it's not like that at all. And once you face up to the fact that bad things happen, it's a struggle, and for some, if there is a reason behind it, who knows, but the thing is, you've got to struggle through it, then you can start living it. Because if you don't expect it, if you don't expect something to happen, that's it won't happen. That's what I think. Or you won't get a shock when it does happen or doesn't happen, if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. You can't get caught in that groove. You know what I mean? You can't expect, everything to be consistent. And no matter what path you're going in, you've got to expect some of the opposite traffic coming that way, because that's just how it works, And I think that all the regrets I ever have, are gone. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't, if to go back now, I couldn't have said this. I couldn't have said this a couple of years ago. But if I could go back now and turn the clocks back, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a single thing, because I just wouldn't. I can't afford to. I can't afford to think in a certain way where I'm going to be carrying something about. I carried stuff about for the last 2 years of my using, and it was horrible, and I've learned to let it all go, for the right reasons, and how could I not be grateful for every mistake that I've ever made? I have to be. They're all lessons, and all the people I've lost, and all the relationships I've ruined, and and everything, the whole spectrum of it. I don't regret a thing. They're all been valuable lessons.
Danny, regret, we can all regret. I do the things I regret, and you think, oh God, but when you think, oh, I wish I could go back and redo that, or do it differently, or appreciate someone more that isn't here anymore, then you say to yourself, do you know what? And I've often said this, you could go back, but still you've got no control over what happens in the world. So you might change one thing, but something else is going to be there. And no matter how much, it's like you think, well, if I acted differently, because I always say this about my papa. My papa, no one knew what he was going through. He was your perfect example of smile on your face, and no one knew that he had this terrible dark cloud in his mind. Terrible dark cloud. And I've often said, my God, if only I'd known. But I was working away, Danny. I couldn't I hardly ever saw my parents. I was working all the time. But I used to think, oh, if I'd only gone back in time. But it would have been pointless because he was the type of man he would have carried on smiling. And he would have found it in the front for me to ask him, are you okay in all this? So it's but so you can go back and change one thing, but that doesn't mean that it's going to make things better because something else will come along, won't it? Won't it?
Yeah.
That's what it does. That's the way I look upon it. Hello, Carol, sweetheart. But anyway, so what I want to go as well is that if you want to talk about your early life and how that started creating you, because I think this is essential and we all are a product of our environment and where we are at that moment and how we think ourselves and how and actually how you think of yourself is shaped by how you're treated by other people. It is. They make you think the way you do about yourself. So your early life, if I went back and said, let's get to when I think people really start showing themselves as being people in their own right or development, 12 years old, between the years of 12 years old and 17, what was Danny like?
I was a thief. I was a thief. I was incredibly mischievous. Hung about with, a good group of lads, and we took drugs, started smoking weed when I was 11, quickly progressed to, trips and magic mushrooms. And we were just tearaways, you know what I mean? I'd do anything for a laugh. I never really got into I'd started boxing when I was 11, but I never really got into a street fight till I was 16. So, from maybe 12 till 16, I wasn't exactly fighting on the street. I was training in the boxing gym, and every spare moment that I had outside the gym, I was taking drugs and I was thieving. And, just probably not really your typical behaviour, but the sad truth is it's very, very common, that behaviour now. You know what I mean? It seems to be everywhere. It doesn't seem to have changed around here. I see little gangs of kids around here doing the same things that I've done, that we done. And it's, it's a sad truth. It's just, I don't even think it's a sad truth. It's just the truth. It's just how it was, because I certainly didn't feel like a sad individual at the time. You know what I mean? We're part of a great crowd. Life was good. I loved everything. I was in amongst everything. I was happy. I can never remember, or at least I seemed it. I can never remember any traumas or incidents that might have shaped us negatively at that time. You know what I mean? Things were just good. I was just mischievous. I was very, very cheeky. And I could run fast. So I never used to mind, giving abuse to the older lot, because, I could always get away. On occasion I got caught and I got a bit of a kicking, but most of the times I could get away. I could run and run. And, I used it to my advantage. I could steal something off somebody right in front of the face, and I could, just run away from it and get away.
Yeah. Because now, here's the question. I want you to be brutally honest. If you'd met someone like me walking down the road, swaggering down the road, when you were in those ages, what would your thoughts? If I'd come up and said to you, can you tell me the time, young man?
Well, would have probably been, I can imagine would have been rather abusive, to be fair. I can imagine would have been rather abusive, there's no point twisting it. We would have been probably rather nasty and, perhaps degrading, and especially once you get that gang mentality thing going, it's you'd all start trying to better each other with the insults and stuff. Yeah.
See, kids are like that. I remember one of my neighbours, they went over to live in Australia, and the little kid, he was a little guess at times, and him and his mate used to, try to be not horrible, they were just cheeky, as kids are, and they'd shout out that he's she and all this business at me. Yeah, he ended up, when he was a teenager, say about 18 onwards, my God, if anyone ever gave me any jip, he'd be the first one to go and front them up. Yeah, it was amazing the way it happened. It was like, he'd be the first one if his mate started, he'd go for them.
Yeah.
But I think all kids are like that. That's it. I'd say you have to sort of like let it go and forgive them, because we've all been there. I was cheeky at times as a kid.
Yeah.
It's when people are older and they're doing it, and you see this on thing go on YouTube, don't you? And they're coming out with the most horrible things, and it's like
Yeah.
you're adults, and you've
Yeah.
got kids, and you're going on like that.
Kids don't, kids. I hear my kids what they're like with each other sometimes. They haven't got a respect or an understanding for that matter. For human emotions or feelings. They don't. They're not fully aware of the damage that they potentially could be doing. But more so, even though they're saying nasty things, on the surface. And I think surface is a good word to describe it. They might seem quite malicious, but the real intent, the real nasty intent to cause harm isn't there because they haven't really got an understanding of it. At that age,
they don't. In other words, what it is, kids, I say, they're in that situation where they've got to impress the peers. They've got to be part, and they've got to be part. If you're brought up in an area or if you're brought up in a social circle where there's an expectation, especially if you're a young lad, to be tough, you're only going to be shunned and become actually someone that's going to be picked on if you don't do that. Same with girls. If you've got girls in an environment where I'm trying to pick my words here, it's trendy to be, let's say the word tarsy, slutty, that way. Yeah, lad, and all this business, giving it all out and talking vile. You have to fit in with that. Whereas if you're in another environment where it's all like very restricted and that, if you're tarsy, it's, shun her. We can't be seen associating with a girl like that. Then you'll act that way. So it's all down to how you're actually brought up. So not brought up the way, because I think the parents get the blame all the time, and it isn't always the parents.
Of course, it's like almost like the chameleon effect, or you familiarize yourself with your surroundings, and I think it comes naturally as a child for acceptance more than anything else.
Yeah. There's someone here, Anthony Baker. So I don't think that's the real Anthony Baker because he'd be able to spell his own name. He can't spell his own surname for some reason in this. But now, when was it that you first decided that you wanted to go into bare knuckle fighting? Or was that the first thing you did? Did you do something else before that?
No, I'd done boxing for a while on and off. Even in the midst of addiction, I was doing the unlicensed boxing for wages, and I got an offer, when I had a fight in the gym in Manchester, which is, well documented, and it blew up all over YouTube. I'm not gonna mention any names, but I think it's obvious we know who we're talking about. And it was about 4 months later or something, 5 months later, I got a phone call from a representative of the BKFC. Had seen the fight and asked us if I wanted a 3-fight contract with the BKFC. And I thought, I didn't take it seriously at first. I thought someone was winding us up, and then I looked into it. It was legitimate. I got back on the phone. I spoke at length with them about it, and I said, something, I'm going to go for it. I didn't want to get to maybe my early 40s or whatever when I haven't got the athletic ability anymore.
Yeah.
And shoulda, coulda, woulda. So I grabbed the bull by the horns, and I'm pleased with what I've done so far. I've only got a couple of fights left in us because my body's shutting down on us, but I've still got the mindset and the heart for it.
Yeah.
I love to fight.
Oh, that's the thing. It's like when the way it's thing going, and it is, you didn't, because of course, I did ballet at and that you have to start young and go for it, but you never quite realize, and that's the thing I'd say, if one thing could have changed, it'd be having it in your mindset that this is going to be very short as a career. Go for it, hell for leather, and even though it's hurts, even though it's exhausting, go for it and just do everything you can and fit it in, because you get to an age where you start thinking, I can't do it anymore. It's not that you can't do it, you're just not capable of doing it. And it's a young person's, which you're job will be as well. It's a young person's job arena to do it. And you have to get to the point where you think, oh, God, I'll have to go into teaching. That's the killer one. I'll have to go into teaching. But yeah, so that's one thing I'd definitely change. But what made you want to go into that? What made you aim for it? Did you have any inspirations? Anyone you admired?
Not really. I watched the bare knuckle for a while, and I liked them all. I liked them all who done it. I had a couple of favourites, but still, I just liked the macho-ness of it, and the balls. You've got to really have a big set of balls to do bare knuckle, and it's something I've always had, but more so I've just always loved to fight, and I thought, I'm not going to be. I don't want to fight anymore in the street. I don't want to lash out, and I don't want to be that person where I, get aggressive and lose my temper and get into altercations with people here, there, and everywhere, which seemed to be the norm for such a long time. I thought now I've got a chance to do it on a big stage, properly, professionally, for good wages, and I thought, and I love to fight, so I'm getting paid for something that I love to do, and I've still got a lot of how can I put it? There's a lot of shit in the basement. You know what I mean? This person that you see, that is happy, and the majority of the time, there's a lot of stuff been buried. You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff I've had to bury, and a lot of stuff I've had to let go of, and it's like when you put shit in the basement. It's like when I fight, I get a chance to channel all that. You know what I mean? There's still there's a fire inside for fighting, and I've probably secretly still got a passion for violence, And
well,
I think,
one thing I saw,
violence attracts people, I've always been attracted to violence, and I think a lot of they can identify with that. You know what I mean? There's an attraction, to violence for me, and it's not so much. I can't quite put my finger on it, and also like, the spectacle of fearsome acts. You know what I mean? Doing, for me, it's refined in the feeling that I get when I'm doing it. When I'm preparing for a fight, or when I'm engaged in a fight, or when I'm walking to the ring for a fight. There's no other feeling on earth like it. Nothing can replicate that feeling. No drug, no mood, nothing can replicate that feeling of being engaged, in unarmed combat. There's something very primal about it. It casts you way back. It's not a feeling that can be mimicked by anything. Do you know what I mean? It's a drug all by itself, and I love it.
Well, it's not only human, it's an animal kingdom instinct. In other words, it's survival. You have to have that violence in you to survive, and that's it. Because if we didn't, and this is what we said, we're really vicious apes that have learned to talk. That's what we are. And that's why when it's dominant on the planets, we are, because we were the most successful at being vicious, because we had the biggest destructive, better than any atom bomb. We had a brain that could work out how to attack. And that's how we did it. And we're very, as well, territorial. That's my space. And that's how, so it's a parser. This is it when people go, oh no, and you do, remember that, got those terrible leftover hippies in the 80s. Oh, I remember them. And they used to always be hanging around the theatres and all this, and they'd be all like, oh, love and peace and all that. And I used to be sitting there, because I've always been a realist in this. It's like, oh, get off with your positivity and love and light, and people aren't. I used to say to myself, do you know what I said? If there was a war, well, my mummy used to say this, she said, God help us, because they just destroy us, they would, with all these mamby-pamby ideas that go on. But you have to be strong,
I think even, I've never been convinced of anyone that tells me, and I'm not bothered if they're a guru or, they're telling me that they've achieved some level of zen. I can't believe anybody that says that they're in that state of mind all the time, because that's just not realistic. It's just not life. You need, in every good there's bad, in every bad there's good. You know what I mean? You've got to have that balance somehow, somewhere. How can you identify with good if you don't know what bad is? Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
just doesn't make sense.
Yin and yang. In other
Absolutely.
words, every plus needs its minus, or every you need both sides of the coin, don't you? Or it won't. That's it. If you don't know you wouldn't know what happiness was if you didn't know what sadness was.
Yeah, bingo.
You'd have nothing to judge it by. It would just be you'd be like an idiotic grinning moron all the time that you wouldn't even know why you were feeling that way. You just would be. But it's just looking at Desmond Tutu. I don't think it's the real Desmond Tutu somehow, even though I know he was a big fan of mine. Ask Danny, it's a good question. This was he afraid of in life? So what is it you're actually afraid of? That's a good one.
My kids. You know, I'm afraid of my kids. They terrify me. They absolutely terrify me. I've got an 18-year-old daughter, you know, and a 17-year-old son, and you know, it's petrifying. It's absolutely petrifying that they're now out there in the big wide world, you know, and I still associate them as my babies, you know, but yet they're going abroad and they're doing all the things that these young people do, and it just absolutely terrifies us to the point where, you know, I can lose sleep. You know, if they're out doing something or they're with some people or they're here or they're there, I can overthink it and I can cost myself a night's sleep. You know what I mean? It's absolutely terrifying, you know, but I try my best, you know, to not to be in that state of mind all the time. But, you know, I'm a parent, you know, I'm a dad, and, you know, I'm very close with all my kids, and that probably terrifies me the most, you know. And it's a funny thing, fear, because 9 times out of 10, you know, we're afraid of things that aren't happening right now. Yeah, exactly. You know, we're afraid of potential. We're afraid of, you know, situational outcomes, when at the end of the day, that stuff hasn't yet happened. You know, so we're very much fearing something that doesn't actually exist. But it's human nature, you know, and it's hard to extinguish, especially once you start that train of thought, you know, and especially with teenage kids. You know, obviously you've got to let kids be kids, but it's hard to turn your brain off to it, you know?
Yeah. That is when people have children. I mean, of course, I've never had children, and I think it's good because I would have been just too obsessive over them, and I know I would have been too obsessive. They would have ended up feeling relieved when they escape me clutches in my eyes, continually watching where they are. But the thing is, it was within the age we live in as well. In the past, people were used to the children. Past mortality rates, especially with infants, was very, very high, and it was like they expected that they'd lose the majority of the children. But now you'd expect your children to carry on, and it's also the world is looking scarier and scarier. So that's what the fear is. But I should say about this, not fearing. What you fear, I've spoken about this before, so I won't go into it in length. It's definitely the case that people get anxious, and a lot of the time when you get someone that's getting anxious and they're being affected by it, the mental health is being affected by it, when you start questioning about it, it's things that have happened in the past or things they're worrying that's going to happen in the future. It's never, it's very rarely now at that present second as you're talking to them.
That's it.
And you have to explain to them and say, look, as you say, it's the chances are it's not going to happen. It's like they used to ask the question, didn't they? Did you know you'd be here in 10 years ago? Would you have expected that you'd be here now? No, I'd say last week, did you know you'd be doing and saying this now? You don't have to go 10 years into the future. You can say the next day, do you know you'll be doing that? And you can never predict. If we could predict what the future held for us, it would be dandy for the lot of us, wouldn't it? It would be great. But you're right. It's trying to let go of that one, the regret, what you were saying before about not holding on to regrets or guilt or whatever. That's essential because, one, it's gone. And if you can make a recompense for it, if you can go, if it's a person or whatever, you can go up and you say, look, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I need your forgiveness if you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Yeah. You do that, but if you haven't got that option that you can go and ask for forgiveness or you can put something right, you have to actually, I don't say forget it. You have to have learned from it and said, right, that's put to bed now. It's going to do no good if I carry on, and I
Absolutely.
could end up doing something
Absolutely.
again.
And I think what's important with stuff like that, from my own experience, is, you've got to be sorry. You've got to be sorry, and it's not just sorry in a way where you're miserable or you're down, but sorry. I'll never say sorry, and I'll never be sorry for anything unless I've learned something. If I've learned something, then I'm sorry. And for me, for when I recognise I'm sorry and the lessons learned, then I can let it go. There's a lot of stuff that I need to make amends for. And if I'm around long enough, I'm willing to make those amends if the opportunities ever present themselves. But it's the same thing as we just mentioned there, worrying about something in the past that is no longer. It's not here now. It essentially doesn't no longer exist. It's the same as worrying about something in the future. It's very much on the same line, because none of it exists. The past and the future, are out of our hands. So overly concerning yourself with either or, can be damaging. But again, it's letting go of it's the difficult thing. Worrying about it's very easy. Worrying about it's very easy.
Regret, I think that's so hard to let go of. But I used to I heard something about the Egyptians, what the ancient Egyptians used to believe, and I think some Indian belief systems believed as well. And what they used to do, they'd actually petition the gods, and they'd say, "Let me put this right when I get over there. If I can't do it now, when I get over there into the next world, let me put it right then." And I always thought that was so beautiful. You put the debt in. They'd actually, when they do things, the ancient Egyptians, if they were lending each other money or doing a job for each other, and say that they didn't have the money to pay it back in finances, the person that they owed the money to could say, right, when we get into the next world, you can pay it back then. I think that's so lovely, because they can let go of it then.
It's a very nice concept. I mean, I've always believed in the afterlife myself, and I behave like that now. I haven't always behaved like that, of course, but I behave like that now. Russell Crowe puts it beautifully in the film The Gladiator. What we do in life echoes in eternity. And I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. I think I like the idea and the concept, and I do truly believe that that you'll be measured. You'll be measured and you'll be judged. Maybe not by some man in a throne, but by an ultimate power. Call it spirituality, call it karma, call it the next life, call it whatever you want. But what we do, I think, in life, in my opinion, there will be a price to pay. That bill will come in. What in this life or the next. And I truly believe that, and I always will from this day forth. And I try my best, to live my life that way. And I think it's just ultimately about doing the right thing when you can do the right thing.
Yeah, I think it's the seed. I remember hearing a priest years ago, and he said, though this wasn't the official line at the church, and he said, you are not punished for your sins, you're punished by your sins. In other words, the fact that it's a sin, if you want to use that word sin, is what will punish you. He said that's what punishes you in the end. He said it's not God sitting saying you have done wrong. This is it. You actually your soul or your spirit, your life force knows what's right and what's wrong. Because let's look another way, Danny. What could be a wrong action for one person might not be a wrong action for another person. Going up and killing someone, we'd all say it's wrong. But if someone's got you and your family in the state that you think, we're not going to survive this, would it be wrong then to do it? That's it. So you can't classify, that's definitely a sin. It's because nothing that was interesting about that was said somewhere in the Bible, I can't remember where it said it, which is also fascinating, was murder. In the Bible, they call it murder of the self. Now, you have to be careful saying the word on YouTube. But when someone actually does something to exit the world themselves, they do it to themselves. Well, that's called self-murder. Well, in the Bible, if you're in a corner and it's between you and another person who survives, you have to take them out.
Yeah.
Because the worst crime is you allowing yourself, because it's seen as being equivalent. If you go on, this pacifism, they get this
Yeah.
pacifism so wrong. It
Mhm.
doesn't, the Bible does not go on about, when it says turn the other cheek, it doesn't mean that you have to be totally passive. No, you've got to preserve your own
Yeah.
life. And if you're forced into a situation where to survive, you have to take the other person out. You have to take them out.
100%. Very good
Yeah.
point there about you know, you'll be served, you know, by your own sins, if you like. And I think that's a brilliant point, because, as you said, what's right for one person isn't right for another. What's wrong for a person isn't wrong for another. And I think, you know, spiritually, you know, these emotions that we get, guilt and things that aren't of the physical world, you know, they're the things that make you pay the most. And you know, what one person might feel guilt over, another person won't.
Yeah.
You know, it's down to like individual spirituality, you know.
Oh, that's it. It's down to even atheists, because actually some of the most moralistic people going, strange enough, who live by very high moral codes are atheists, I've noticed. So this idea that, you know, you have to be spiritual or something like that, it's a lot of atheists have very strict codes of conduct. So you don't have to be religious to have it happen. But I'd say it's always nice to believe that there's something that we go to. But again, this is another thing I always say, Danny, we don't know whether that's going to be better than being here. And that's it. We don't know whether it's going to be something much, much better. An ancient man, I always say, if you want to find out what is the likelihood, if there is anything what's going to be, if you look at ancient man, this concept that we just suddenly die and our spirit pops out and flies up to heaven to live in bliss forever is a modern concept, because before then, ancient man always believed that it was a journey. So you pop out of your body, yeah, but then you've got to get where you need to go, and it's supposed to be a very haphazard journey to get there, and you have to do all sorts to get there. So you say to yourself, is it any better? That's why I never say, oh, you know, life is so hard. To say, no, it might be bleeding. You might get over there and say, is this it? Is this the promise we got? Get out of it. And that's why you get so many ghosts, because they come down thinking, oh, stuff this. Let's get some excitement. It's boring up here. Here we are. Kelsey's got a good question. Do you have a 5-year or 10-year plan for yourself, or do you just take things as they come?
Yeah, I've got a plan. You know, and I've never had one before. I mentioned it before on a podcast that was just went out today with Cullen Mays on the Central Club, which I thought went brilliantly. You know, the whole time I was growing up, my entire life, right through my marriage of over 10 years, right through everything, you know, I never had a plan. I floated around with no direction. And when I was younger, when I was at school and when I was growing up, looking back, I never wanted to be anything. You know, if someone said, what do you want to be? What did you want to be? The answer was nothing. You know, and isn't that just the irony of it? Because that's exactly how I ended up, with nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and now I've got myself this plan where, you know, I want to be remembered by my loved ones for all the right reasons. You know what I mean? And that's enough for me. I'm fortunate enough, you know, that money isn't my God. I'm not driven by money. I don't chase money, you know, but I'm grateful to have a couple of notes at the minute, which is always nice, you know, but I want to leave something behind for my kids, you know. I want to, you know, ultimately legacy, you know, I want to be remembered for all the right reasons. You know, I want to be, you know, giving myself a constant reminder to do the right thing. You know, when I am in the ground, if that's in a week's time, or if I don't wake up in the morning, or if I'm lucky enough to have another 10 or 20 years, you know, ultimately for me, it's about legacy. You know, I want to leave something behind. I want to be remembered, because ultimately when we're gone from this life, that's all we're going to have. You know, the only thing we're going to have left on this earth is, you know, other people's memory of us.
Hmm.
you know, and I want to leave something behind. You know, I want my kids to look at something. You know, I want them to look at my life, and I want them to remember me, and I want to live on through my kids and through my loved ones, and I want them to say, "That's my dad. That was my
Yeah.
dad." You know, and that ultimately, I want nothing more. You know what I mean? I don't want anything more.
No.
It's nice to have material things. Yeah, they're nice, but you know, if you're familiar with Alexander the Conqueror, you know, he put it perfectly. You know, whatever your gatherings and your material possessions are on this earth, they stay on this earth. You can't take anything with you. You know what I mean? Don't get too tied up in this material world, because you know, ultimately when it's gone, it's gone.
Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know he was non-binary? They'd call him nowadays non-binary. He
Right.
married a man at one point.
All
Yeah.
right. Well.
Yeah, so he was saying, well, the Greeks were into all that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course there were. But yeah, I mean, that's for me. That's it. You know, legacy. I want my kids to remember us for being the best person. You know, a person who tried and who done the right thing. And I'm fortunate enough to have got my life turned around when my kids are relatively young. You know,
Yeah.
giving them the best life that I can. And I'm sure when my day's done, you know, when I'm finished, you know, they'll be proud of us. You know, and I'll be
Yeah.
a good stead in their memory. And you know,
Leaving
that's
the
enough for me.
legacy.
That's enough
What
for
do you,
me.
what do you think? One of my well, it is my favorite. My favorite quote from Shakespeare is from The Tempest, and it starts off. I won't read the whole quote out because it's quite long. Our revels now are ended. It's titled, and what it does is the main character Prospero has put on this wonderful display for this wedding. It's a mask, and it's all these spirits pretend to be goddesses and all that, and it's all sumptuous and everything. And then he turns around to the married couple and says, "It's all going to fade and be forgotten." And he goes on. Shakespeare was such a brilliant brain. He was an absolutely brilliant brain. And he just sums up in these words that no matter what you've got in the world, the palaces, the earth itself, the globe itself, whatever, and all these sumptuous places that we have. And he says, one day they're just going to dissolve and leave not a rack behind. In other words, it's all going to go. And what he was saying, don't get fixated on, you know,
Yeah.
greatness as such, because
Yeah.
he said greatness will be forgotten in the midst of times. In other words, you'll never, because if you look at the great people of the past, like, well, like people like Alexander the Great and the Egyptians, well, the great Egyptian, we can't fathom what some of those Egyptian pharaohs achieved. I mean,
No.
talk about greatness. We haven't got anyone that's been close to that for thousands of years. But
True.
do people know about them now sufficiently? We can only piece together what. So, what's your thoughts on that? That actually, eventually, we all become a memory that's going to be forgotten, no matter how hard we strive.
Yeah, you know, I think it's rather undeniable, isn't it? You know, we're not remembered forever. You know, if I can be remembered by my grandkids, I think that'll be an incredible achievement. You know, old Grandad Danny, wasn't he some chava? You know, I think that'll probably do me.
Well, this you've got a chance now of beating your great grandkids. Years ago, no one did. You popped off before you got to see your great grandkids. If a humble
Yeah.
wants you to sing a song. Have you heard Danny's last? Oh, you. Is she a wife or is she a partner?
No, she's my girlfriend, Alice. You know, I love her too. I love the last two bits.
Yeah,
Um,
because
she's a brilliant singer. You know, she plays the piano and she sings. She's good. You know, she's really good.
oh, piano. I wish I would have learned. I was actually having piano lessons in school, and you say, "What am I supposed to do? Go on the stage, dance, and play a piano at the same time?" And I'm so annoyed now that I never kept my piano lessons up.
Yeah,
So annoyed.
I wouldn't say a regret. I don't want to call it a regret, but I would have liked to have learnt an instrument. You know, preferably the guitar. I would have loved to.
Mm.
You know, an incredible talent when somebody can
Oh
play an
yeah,
instrument fluently. It's
that's it. It is because I mean, I say dancing careers are short lived. especially ballet careers, there's only so long you'll last. But
Mm.
you can create music until you drop, can't you? At 90
Yeah.
years old, you can still create music. And I think there's something people I really admire are people who can paint, and I mean really paint what's in their head and get it on a canvas. And people who can produce music as well. I think that's absolutely because you're always going to be able to create. Whereas, it's sad. Hey, what's this? And you need to listen to Alice sing. Very talented. I think he wants Alice to sing, to do a song here now.
At her house tonight, I'm sat with the kids, but she's got her own channel. She uploads a lot of her own videos and that, I'll just get over to her channel, Alice Keane. She does some good stuff, man. And listen, I'm proud of her, because she's only just got back into it. She played the piano a lot when she was younger, and she never looked at it or touched it for 10 years plus. And she got herself a decent, big keyboard, and she got herself back into it. She's always been a decent singer. Now she's put the two together, and yeah, listen, she can bring a tear to me eye sometimes, singing the right song at the right moment.
Well, John, go and find the link to a channel and put in the chat for us, will you? See if John does that. But yet, it's now we've gone past the teenage years and all this. Now, there was a time when you went through what you can only call a dark night of the soul, when we've seen some of the videos where you're really... We won't talk about what inspired those videos because we can't really talk about that. But when you were in that place where you were absolutely unraveling at times, and that's what I like about you, Danny, as well, when you've shown as well yourself on camera in floods of tears, absolutely desperate, crying out to the ether anywhere. You couldn't cope, you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Now, you got to that stage where that was absolutely rattling round in your head. When you think back now and you look back, what have you learned from that situation? If a similar situation was to arise now, what would be the difference in the Danny now to the Danny back then, how you'd respond to it?
Oh, my reaction would be planets apart. My reaction would be absolutely planets apart. Ultimately, it wasn't so much the situation, it wasn't so much what was happening around me or towards me. It was me. The problem was me. The problem was always me. It didn't matter who it was or what was coming my way. It really didn't matter. The problem was me. You all right, Deej?
Someone just take the tumble.
You all right, Deej? Yeah, all right. Stand up. You're brave. The youngest there just toppled down the last couple of steps.
Oh, God.
But ultimately the problem was me. I'd channel all my negativity and stress and everything that was going on in my own life, and like I say, my inability to deal with problems appropriately. That's what you're seeing in them videos. Me channeling it all. Instead of dealing with it all, it was instead of dealing with it internally, I was channeling it externally. And that's what you're seeing. So now, with me being in a different place, that person, hopefully is dead and buried, because it's so far away from me, my reactions and how I feel and how I think. But listen, there's still a little bit of that person in there. You know what I mean? But it's a trace amount, compared to what it was.
Yeah. And the other thing is, it's not letting other people. I can't even remember the quote, but someone posted something. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. And it said, don't let other people dictate how you act.
Of course, at the end of the day, if somebody's controlling your emotions and somebody's able to control your emotional state, then they're essentially your master. You're like a puppet on a string. You're not in charge of own destiny, you know what I mean? And your emotions are getting pulled in a whole different directions because of something or because of someone or something else. You know, ultimately it's just weakness, you know, is what it is.
Yeah, that's it. But I think it's essential to have, especially when you wear like that. And I remember Paul Venice at one point, though, he took the video down. You know, when he crashed, it was a very short crash, thankfully, but he relapsed and he was like on his bed saying, "So you want to see and all that." Things like that, I think people can learn from, because you've got to see when people see when someone's at the bottom. That's a great warning to others if they want to give out a message, especially to you, to whatever. Don't go down this route, because guess what? This is what you're going to end up as. And they say, you know, getting youths involved in, what would you call it? Not physical arts. What would you call it? No, when boxing and all that. There's a term don't you, for all contact sports. That's it.
Combat sports.
Yeah. Combat. When they get the youths in there, because if you see people who learn martial arts, they've got very, very strict codes of conduct there, and it's all about respect, and not questioning. And you must be respecting when you're on the dojo. You have to be acting the same way, or they'll absolutely cut into anyone that disrespects anything about the dojo.
100%.
That should follow through. Now, if they're learning bare knuckle fighting or boxing, that should follow through there, that you don't do it or you're not going to be accepted in here unless you learn also how to be respectful. Yeah,
you know, kids should. I think all kids, you know, and I repeat, all kids, in my opinion, should do some form of combat sports. You know, not only because of the world that we live in, but you know, the discipline. And, you know, like you say, when you're in that place of training, all places of training, it doesn't matter what sport it is. If it's combat sports, you know, you leave your ego at the door. Do you know what I mean? It's nothing to do with, it couldn't be, you know, the ego couldn't have anything less to do with it, you know, and the discipline that's instilled and the respect, you know, that the kids can gather. And, you know, the relationships that I had with my coaches were absolutely brilliant, you know, and I think ultimately, you know, the discipline and the structure and the respect, you know, is something that all kids can get those things from combat sports. You know, they don't have to go on and be a world champion, or they don't even have to go on and compete, you know, but to get basics in that and to get a familiarization with those types of surroundings and those types of, you know, disciplines is can only be a good thing, you know, in my opinion.
And that's it, but one thing I don't like, Daniel, like your view on this, is that this message like that they give out, was it knives down, fists up, or something like that kind of thing. Do you know what I don't like about that? There's one thing teaching a child combat sports or a youth combat sports and instilling respect in them. But when someone says, oh, instead of using a knife, coming in, just learn how to punch each other or settle your arguments, that really turns me cold, because they know what you're saying is, whether they like it or not, they're saying that the correct response to a dispute with someone is to get in a ring and punch the hell out of each other. Now, that's what I don't like, and I think it demeans the art, which it can be held as an art form, some combat sports, because they're that difficult. And I'll say something about that, why they can be considered art forms, especially the martial arts. Is no, they shouldn't. I don't like the idea that they give out this message. Hey, well, you've got a dispute, get in a ring and sort it out, because I think no matter whether there's knives going around or not, you're still giving the message out. This is it. Smash each other to bits, and I don't like return. I think it demeans the whole purpose of it.
I think for a dispute to be settled that way, I think the main things is you have to have two like-minded people. You know, you have to have two like-minded people who both mutually agree to do something like that. And if you can't get that, you know, then the thing should probably never even be suggested. If you've got two people that are of the same nature and that are both willing to participate in something like that, you know, that's when it's going to happen. You know, you only have to look at the traveling community, how they settle their beefs. That's not a sport. You know, that's not a sport the way they settle it. that's how do you want to put it? It's part of the culture, you know. So there's a few. It depends on how you look at it. I certainly don't think kids should be advised, you know, or I don't think it should be dressed up as some kind of good thing, for
exactly
batter the brains out of each other. But it is one way of sorting it out if you've got two, willing participants.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not the best way of sorting things out.
Mm.
In my opinion, for some people maybe it is, but I've done a lot of it, and ultimately, it doesn't make you feel as good as you might, as you might think it does. Even for someone who likes doing it, it's
just to me,
it's not as rewarding as you might think. It's very dangerous and it's damaging. But listen, it's probably always going to be there. But I think ultimately, if kids can get enough training, to defend themselves, but more so to get the discipline and the structure, which is, so important, especially in young teens. You know what I mean? To get that bit of balance, I think is, can only be a good thing.
Yeah. To say there is I say plus minus, but talking about the art form, because believe it or not, I did when I was younger learn ninjutsu, not to a very high standard. I was never a black belt or anything, but actually did ninjutsu. And the fascinating thing, I had to do the sword work and everything, and I hated doing that. Because I couldn't see the point. I thought, I'm not going to be walking down the bleeding road with a samurai sword, am I? But anyway, I remember one thing about it when I was doing it. I thought, these are very dancey moves. Now, one thing about ballet, which surprised a lot of people, ballet actually was first inspired, if you go right back to its basic roots, by sword fencing in France. Because if you look at the way sword fences, actually the way they stand and the foot's out and all that, and they have very classical stances, that's what started it. Well, actually, when we were doing the training, Sensei turned around and said, a lot of the martial arts were actually got through dance moves. And what they do, they'd learn, because at one time, especially in Japan, it was banned combat or anything like that, martial arts. But they'd actually move their arms in dancing. And they found out that if they put their arm, let's say, in a certain way around a person, they could move that person, get control of them, or they move with each other. So actually, martial arts, which I found absolutely fascinating, was born out of dancing, because they realized as it was evolving that they could use it to protect each other as well. So so it's an art form. It's definitely an art form. So say that tomorrow something happened and it was like, Danny Christie can't do bare knuckle boxing anymore. What would you do? What would you like to go into that next?
Sport-wise and athletically for myself, nothing. I don't want to do anything when this is finished. I'm going to stay fit and healthy, but I'm not going to compete physically anymore. This is my last roll of the dice. You know what I mean? Once this is finished, I'm going to enjoy, other aspects of my life. I'm going to coach kids. I'm going to be attached to one of the amateur clubs and I'm going to coach kids. I'd love to, help kids and pass on some of the knowledge that I've got and just, get them relationships going with kids, like the relationships that I had going with my coaches, all the deep, respectful relationships, you know what I mean? And it done me the world of good. It never lasted because I went my own way, but, I can remember the respect I had for them, and the respect that was shown to me. It's having a coach-student type relationship is mutually beneficial, and that's what I look to be getting into, when I've looked in.
So that's what you'd ultimately like to go into, teaching.
Yeah.
Oh, that's that I was wondering that, because I think that's essential, isn't it, to go into that side of, and I think you've got also the personality, you've got the ethical code to be able to pass on that message as well, that actually the responsibility is to use it only when it's actually a job that you're doing in a professional way, or when you're in danger or you're protecting someone, that's the only time you actually do that. Because I think you've got the right mindset for it, I do. But actually, do you know what I've met, and I have done? Not bare knuckle fighters, but I've met combat sport people before and teachers. And the vast majority, actually, I don't think I've actually met one that had what you'd call a thuggish way of teaching. They got in there and they all had a message of, no, you have to be disciplined, you have to be use it right, you're representing the sport, so you have to act in this way.
That's across the board. That reflects in most fighters. Even the trash talky type stuff that you see, you know, there is the occasional, you know, wanker mixed in there, but it's very rare. You know, most fighters of all combat sports who compete on any kind of level, you know, when the camera's off, if they've got a bit of mouth on them or they're trying to sell a fight, you know, 99 times out of 100, when the camera's off and you've got that person who is the real edition of that person, you know, you'll find that they're very nice and they're very respectful. You know, there's a lot of good people in combat sports, you know, and it far outweighs the bad people that's in there, because I've come across a few people before in boxing and in bare knuckle, and not necessarily even the people I'm fighting, just people at different shows. And my first opinion is, you know, I don't like him. You know, he's this, he's that, he's whatever. Then you get speaking to him backstage or behind the thing, and he's actually nothing like that. He's just trying to sell the fight. You know, you get a lot of nice, genuine, respectful, polite, kind, courteous people in combat sports, you know, in abundance.
I think what is when someone gets to the professional side, because I used to know them, but I used to, because we would say major, used to know a boxer who became a boxer anyway, a well-known boxer, especially in Merseyside and England. And I remember him, he was the one that just, you know, when all kids do cheer, and I was very loud and in your face when I became a teenager, used to wear makeup like a mask, and wow, I was really into the gender bend, and it was gender bend a big star with me. Would be wearing mini skirts and high heels. And do you know what? He never got phased one bit, where other people would be, you know, the same age range, I say the same age as me, would be slagging me off and all this. And it wasn't until years later I realised it was because he didn't really have time, or he was that busy getting where he needed to be in his sport. He just didn't have time to be bothered what anyone else was doing. And that always struck me. It wasn't until years later, and I haven't seen him for years, but last time we met him and his brother, I saw him and his brother, and they were like, hi, and all this, how you doing? And I always remember that. So I think the mark of a real professional is they just haven't got time to be bothering getting involved in what other people are doing. They're toast, because it's a discipline, isn't it, where you've got to spend a lot of time on it. You've got to devote yourself to it 100%.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll start winding up in a minute.
But 5 minutes or something, and if you don't mind, then I'll wrap it up. I've got to go upstairs, doing upstairs. There'll be like a tornado's been in them 2 bedrooms now, no doubt.
Hey, you don't leave hands shut to do cleaning up, for God's sake. What? My God. Because this is what I want us to know. I want you to give, lastly, you're in a school now, you're talking to youths, and you can see that there's a problem with these youths you've been asked in. I want you to give 3 pieces of advice that you wish you'd been given and listened to when you were their age.
Right. I've had this one before. First of all, before I say anything, I just want to say it is a very difficult one, because even me, you know, kind of knowing what I know now, you always hear that thing, you know, if I knew what I knew now when I was an early teen or whatever, yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, I think most of the time, kids are going to do what they want to do anyway. And it doesn't matter who they've got that's given advice. You know, you're only going to wean out, you know, a small percentage of kids that are actually going to pay any attention to what somebody who actually knows all the answers is telling them. You know, it is a difficult one, but, you know, let's say we're speaking to kids that are going to listen, you know, then, you know, I would say, first and foremost, I would say, live for today. Live for today. Anything you want to do in your life, do it today. You want to start some course, you want to be what you want to be, do it today. As in, have a goal and actively go about it today. Would be the first bit of advice that I would give, whether it was taken on board or not.
Mm.
And I think ultimately, and in the same aspect, do it today. You see, a lot of things I should have done, and I do this because I refer to myself purely because my journey's the one that I know more than anybody else's. It's very difficult to comment on somebody else's life or experiences because I haven't lived them. I'm me. I've lived my life. So I would say any amends that you feel like you need to make, anything that's bothering you, be it family, be it a loved one, be it a sibling, whatever it is, be it a friend, if you need to make some amends, don't wait, don't wait, and finally, aim for the stars, aim for the stars, whether you're living for today or whether you're not, you can aim big, you can dream big, and you can have aspirations, beyond anyone's beliefs, Nobody can tell you that you can't do something. If you believe you can do something, then do it. Go for it. Dream big. Dream big, because that's something I certainly never done. I made a reference before about, the whole time I didn't want to be anything, and isn't that just exactly what I ended up? I didn't want to be nothing and I ended up being nothing, and I think that was ironic, and I think that would probably reflect, if you dream of something, you live something, you work towards something, ultimately there's a lot higher chances if you're getting it, whatever you put in your sights and you work towards and get.
And essential for parents as well. And I keep on saying this, look, parents out there, your kids can still be ordinary kids, don't worry, but you've got to give them the impetus, you've got to give them the push to actually get interested in things, and don't stick them in a room with a computer and say, there we are, they're out the way. Get them out, and when they're young, get them used to when they're very young, which happened to me, getting out there, doing it. Then they decide when they get older whether they keep it up or not, because they're going to struggle, kids doing it on their own. But anyway, there was someone, Claire, the Tate brothers, right? There's no point going into that because, let the Tate, I'm sure the Tate brothers with the millions or whatever they've got will be one bit bothered what Danny thinks about them, or so let them get on with it. That's why I say I refuse to have any sympathy. I'm sorry with multi-millionaires like that. But anyway, Danny, it's been brilliant speaking to you, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely great.
That's been decent. That seems to have flew in. Yeah. Listen, it's been a pleasure, and I said I was going to do a little chat with you for a while, and I'm glad I've done it. It went well.
Yeah, the bleeding computer net went off. And thank you to everyone in the chat. And thank you. Humble Dry has been a very good mod today. He's a moderator on my channel. So anyway, take care, Danny, and God bless your family. And everyone in the chat, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So
God bless.
Care.
God bless everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye for now.